Good evening, everyone. Just want to say hi. Starting up a few seconds early. It's fine. Wanted to see how everyone was doing. You know, we just got done with the holidays and see if everyone made it through and everybody had some great holidays. So tonight we're going to be tying a fly called the Picket pin. This is an early 1900s pattern, so this is an old school pattern. We're going to be tying it up with some different materials than what the official recipe calls for, but we're kind of making do. So one thing that we can do is you can change materials. Jonathan, still healthy? It's always a good option. It's always the best option. But yeah, you can change materials if you don't have them. And I'm going to go through like what you're supposed to use, you know, in that spot and what I'm using because I couldn't find what I needed. So this fly is pretty simple. It is one of those patterns that, okay, they say can do everything. It is a dry fly, it is a nymph, it is a wet fly, it is a streamer. You know, but the only thing that it isn't is an Atlantic salmon fly. It's like the only thing it isn't. So when you tie it up as a dry, you're going to use a lot more hackle, use a light wire hook. I've never fished this fly as a dry. I actually do fish this fly quite a bit. I use it traditionally as more of a kind of a nymph wet fly sort of thing, or kind of streamery. I'll dead drift it like a streamer. I use this thing for brook trout. It's kind of where also I learned one of my favorite little tricks is to fish a stimulator subsurface for brook trout. That's a fun one. That usually blows some people's minds. But this thing, if you look at it, it's kind of similar to a stimulator. I'm guessing probably there's some relation between the two flies. I've never looked into the exact details, but I guarantee, if I remember right, stimulator comes from about the same area. So I'm guessing that there's probably some relation. So with this fly, I'll start out with just talking about some materials. For a tail, I'm using pheasant tail. What it calls for is brown hackle fibers. You know, today's world, they probably say coq de leon. I don't ever use the stuff. I like brown hackle fibers. But traditionally, you're going to use a brown hackle fiber for the tail. It is peacock herl for the body. And then with a brown hackle, brown stiff hackle, so something like a woolly bugger hackle, because the fact that this is going to be fished subsurface. And then traditionally, you're going to use squirrel tail for the wing. I can't find my squirrel tail, and sadly, well, I guess not sadly, I haven't seen any squirrels get hit by any cars lately. You know, any like squirrels on the road for me to be able to grab some squirrel tail. That is how I get most of my squirrel tail. I don't buy it. I get it from the side of the road. And then the head is also going to be peacock herl. So it's a cool pattern, simple pattern in the scheme of life. I am tying it on, see if this will be in focus, a bead-head hook, size 10. Just a size, I like size 10, and the bead-head hook, no reason I grabbed bead-head hook other than I happen to have a whole pile of them, and also the fact that that little bit of a curve in the shank, I think is kind of nice with this fly. It's kind of cool. You know, if you look at the fly, there really isn't any curve until you get to that tail. That tail's sitting down. But when we fish this fly, or at least when I fish it, I typically like dead drift it. I will dead drift it, or, you know, kind of keep a slight tight line onto it. And it's what I use. What is the attracting part of it? I really don't know. Is it the white wing? That's possible. Is it, you know, the hackle? That's possible. Does it look like food? Yeah, it kind of looks like food. It's supposed to be, when fished on the surface, as a hopper or a stonefly. I don't see either of them, but then again, we're talking early 1900s, so things were a little bit different back then. Everything was a lot more interpretational. So, just grabbing some hooks out, because I did not do that before, because I was not prepared today. Busy with work stuff today. You know, it's not a bad thing. Can't complain. Well, I can, but nobody will listen to me. So, gonna start out and grab our hook. I'm gonna take this one out, drop it out, throw it onto the desk. Put our hook in. Brian likes to crush his barbs beforehand. Not the worst idea. Since this is a fly that's typically going to be tied as a brook trout fly, at least for me, I really should get into that habit. I just don't. My habit is before I go to fish it, actually usually after about the second cast, then I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot to debarb the hook. To be blunt, that's actually usually how it goes. Usually it's like the second or third cast, I go, oh, I forgot to debarb. So, start out with our thread. Start out somewhere on the hook. Honestly, it's not a super big deal. Where we start, we just want to put thread onto hook. Cut off our tag end. I can't do that little pop thing that other people do. And we are going to go back to about where, if you've been tying flies with us for very long, about where that barb sits. Or if you're tying on a barbless hook. Yeah, Brian, last trip I had to steal Brian's pliers stream side in order to be able to crush the barb. Worst thing was that my pliers were in my bag. I just couldn't find them. Yeah, that happens. I'm not immune to it. If anybody knows, my bag has usually got about 300 pounds worth of stuff in a 5-pound bag. It's just sort of what I do. I really got to get out of that habit too, but yeah, I don't want to be without. So, next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab our tail material. If you want to use brown hackle, use brown hackle. Like I said, I'm going to use pheasant tail, because I got a whole pile of pheasant tails. I'm kind of lucky in that a buddy of mine, about 3 years ago now, went up to PA, got his limit on pheasant, and came back and said, hey, I don't need them. I got 1 million pheasant tails. You want them? I took them. So they are not the greatest pheasant tails in the world. They are kind of, to be honest, junk. But so this tail, in fact, what I cut off is nowhere near enough tail material. So let me pull off a whole bunch, because you want a fairly thick tail on this fly. So, like I said, I did not grab enough. When I first grabbed it, happens. So this is going to be a fairly short little tail. Think about a hook gap, maybe a hook gap and a half in length. So, sort of what I usually think of with this fly. Most wet flies. So just a little kind of way to think about when you're tying flies. And when you're kind of thinking of traditional kind of ways of doing it. Most wet flies, so anything subsurface, your tail is going to be about a hook gap in length. Now, when we start getting into dry flies, your tail is oftentimes going to be a hook shank in length. Why is that? Because typically, well, actually, I don't have a good reason for that. That's just what traditionally all the books call for. So, somebody somewhere decreed this is the rule, and that's what we do as fly tyers. Welcome to fly tying. If you don't like the rule, understand somebody gave the rule 50 years ago, and you have to live by it now. So, I'm going to tie in this material. Going to work our way up the shank. Going to go about 2/3 of the way up the shank. Kind of trying to get a little bit of a body on this. I like having a little bit bigger of a body on this fly. Work our way back. Now we're going to grab our hackle, and I actually did a little picking out my hackles. To be honest, my neck is getting a little thin, and I'm having to really pick through them, and it takes me a little while. So in order to be able to find the hackle size that I need to get a new neck. So not gonna lie, guys, my neck is one of the not great ones that comes in the kits, and this is one that I just happened to have picked up somewhere. Who knows? I don't know how it ended up in my bag, my fly tying stuff, but it did, so I got to deal with it. So we're gonna tie it in, and what we want to do is there's a shiny side. No, not a shiny side. I'm actually going to tie it in far side of the hook on the tip of by the tip, shiny side in. wrap that up, and then wrap back. Are you seeing a pattern going on here? Next material that we're going to need, I'm using strung peacock herl. So you can use a sword and be able to pull your herls out of there if you prefer. There is nothing wrong with that. You are a better fly tyer than I, because I like strung peacock herl because I am kind of lazy, and it's also probably the same reason why that I like the Whiting 100 packs, because I don't have to generally then pick out anything. You know, I just go, oh, I need a size 10 in brown. Okay. But I don't have any size 10 in brown. And I'm actually going to pull out, I mean, that's 5. Yeah, about 5. I'm going to pull out a whole pile of herl. Only because with this herl that I've got, I know it's kind of skimpy. So it's some skinny stuff. So I'm going to even up all the tips. And I'm going to tie it in again. Tie down. Tie back. And now, I can't remember if we've ever showed you guys this trick, because I don't know how much we've really worked with herl. I'm going to say this, guys, I don't remember what we did last summer and every single thing we did. Not sure if Brian showed this trick. So there's a trick with peacock herl, by the way, is super fragile stuff. It's a horrible material in the sense that it's fragile, but there's so many ways to make it better. You could always grab the good old super glue, put a little super glue across the top, and I have done that before, but I've actually got a way that I like a little bit better. And that is actually to take the herl and kind of wrap it around the thread a bit. Okay, then I'm going to wrap that herl on. I'm going to basically do it touching wraps up to about, basically about 2 eye lengths back, 2-3 eye lengths back. You kind of want to do where you would do a stimulator. Like I said, there's definitely some relationship between these two flies. I wish I could sit there and tell you I know all the history of fly tying, but sadly, yeah. I know a lot of the old stuff, but I don't know everything. Now, I'm going to trim that off, and I'm actually going to save this little bit. I'm going to need this in a few minutes. So, we can probably guess that's what it was. Okay. Brian, yeah, it's one of those I couldn't remember. I know I thought I'd seen you do it. But yeah, great technique. Great way to make peacock herl tough. You'll never make it tough. But way to make it survive. This fly is also really good for bluegill. Now, if you're going to tie it for bluegill, I would definitely do a wire also. If you ever have noticed, I don't wire my flies. I never put a reinforcing wire into my flies. Partially because I love tying. Brian knows I love tying in bulk. If you guys haven't learned, when I like to tie, when I sit down, I'm going to tie a dozen of each fly. It's how I tie. It's kind of what I learned to do. It was something that I was taught years ago, was how to make your flies look pretty. Was don't tie 1 or 2 of them, because your first fly that you tie is generally going to be an ugly one. Even if you know how to tie the pattern, the first one's going to be an ugly one. By the time you get to 10 or 12, they start getting really pretty. And I like having pretty flies. I like pretty flies. I tie ugly, but they're pretty in my mind. So, next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our hackle. I'm going to grab my hackle pliers, because with this I need it. Where are my hackle pliers? Had them the other day. They were in here, in this jumbled mess of tools. There they are. That's my good ones. I've been missing these for a while. So, grabbing my hackle pliers, and I'm going to do about, because I want this to be more of a subsurface pattern, about 4 to 5 wraps forward. I There's one. There's two. There's three. There's four. And we'll get 4 and a bit. I said 4 to 5. So pull it tight. Grab our nice sharp scissors. Missed the hackle stem. There we go. So, grabbed our hackle. Now traditionally for this fly, you would use squirrel tail. But like I said earlier, I'm out of squirrel tail. It pains me because I know I've got some. Now some of the squirrel tail I have will probably never get used, but that's due to who gave it to me. But I know I had squirrel tail. I had a whole pile of them. I don't know where I put them. So somewhere in a move they disappeared. So I'm actually going to tie this fly with a bucktail. Whoop, not in the frame. Tie it up with a good old bucktail, something you can use. Yeah, you can, yep, that's one thing I guess I didn't mention that. Good point, Brian. I actually sized this, and now traditionally you're going to want, typically you're going to want your hackle barbs about to the hook point. I'm going a little long on this. That's more like about a size 8 hackle. But I actually like that for this fly because I'm kind of trying to make a little bit bushy of a fly. This thing at this point kind of is a woolly bugger-ish fly. So there's a lot of flies out there that are related to the woolly bugger. This one is another one where you look at it and you go, oh, it's just a woolly bugger at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some of the white hair. And I'm actually going to grab from kind of higher up in the tail. Because down here at the bottom, even though I have broken this off, this is really hollow fiber. So a bucktail starts out kind of hollow, almost like a deer belly hair, and works its way up to being finer and finer. And then up at the very tip is awesome stuff. I usually try to save that for my flies. I want to make it look really pretty. So when you're doing this though, one thing you got to think about is the hair down near the base of the tail. And remember guys, always cut from right at the base. That was actually something that one of my early fly tying instructors told me. He goes, because you can always cut it shorter. And it's not the whole, oh, you could make it long, you can't really make it longer, but when you go to grab from that general area the next time, you're going to have to work around those long fibers that you left. So it's more to save yourself sanity, and also because we were using his materials to save him sanity. Just one of those. So you're going to grab a pretty good sized chunk of bucktail. I mean, I'm grabbing, approaching on what you would use for a Clouser minnow. So, because I'm going to shorten this bucktail up so much. Cut it off. Don't really worry about getting out the shorts because, let's be honest here, we're going to be using everything. So, now you could stack this if you wanted to. And in fact, I probably should. Before I stack it, I'm going to want to shorten it up just a little bit. So if you've got a hair stacker, use it. If you don't, not a big deal. This fly can be tied pretty ugly. Somewhere in here is the rest of my hair stacker. One of these days I gotta show you guys how disorganized my fly tying stuff is. And you will laugh, and you will wonder how I can even put these on. So, going into my hair stacker, whoop, forget that I'm not always zoomed all the way. Put it in. Shake everything. Pull out of the hair stacker, and if you can just see the tips of everything. And you're going to want to grab them by the tips and pull it out. So I pulled it out with my left hand, transferring to my right hand, kind of just making sure everything's right. Pull out that one that didn't stack correctly, because, you always have one rebel. Always going to have one rebel. And then we're going to put this on here, and I'm going to set this length. And what I want is, one, to not have fuzzies in my fly. Ironically, I couldn't see that in the actual fly. I had to see it on my screen. I'm going to want this tail just a little bit longer than that. I want it to be basically about half the way down the, or not the tail, well, bucktail, yes, but this wing, and that's what this is. This is a wing of a fly, about halfway down the tail. So that right there is about right. So I'm going to switch fingers to put it about where I want it, and do 1, 2, start tightening up, and then look at it, because right now I could back a couple of thread wraps off, change it, slide it, and be able to, you know, adjust this to make it the way I want it. That looks good to me. So now it is time. Trim off. If you notice, I trimmed off on a slight angle. If you trim off on an angle, you won't get a big bump there. It's kind of interesting how the view I'm getting compared to you guys. But if you look, you see how this is kind of going down on an angle? That's going to make it easy for me to then take my thread and cover everything up. And if you look, I've still got a bump there. You notice how my thread wasn't jumping up? That's because I had a little bump there. And it looks like I caught a couple of hackle fibers. Oh well. So, now what we're going to do is we're going to tie in the rest of our peacock herl. If you need to grab more, go for it. Don't try to be a hero and try to save every little bit of material. Peacock herl is cheap. You know, yeah, I know mine's a couple of years old. $6.50 for enough peacock herl to last most people about half a lifetime. One of those materials, guys, that, you know what, it's pretty cheap. I'm sure it's gone up in price, but, you know, as I tell people, like, I don't look at the price of most fly tying materials because I need them. You know, well, I do look at it, but, you know, it's one of those, like, generally I need it, so I'm willing to pay it. To me, this is a hobby. This isn't a business, so I'm not worried about price quite as much. You know, if I can't afford a material, then you know what? I find a substitute. And I might go do some researching online for that substitute. So I'm going to do my little wraps. We're going to wrap on a nice little head. Nope, can't break it. If that was a single herl, I could easily break it with my hands. No, I'm not that weak. So, at this point, we're basically done. Like, the only thing we got to do is put a head on this fly. So this is like I said, this is a pretty simple little pattern. It's a hopper pattern if you put some floatant onto it. It's, you know, in reality for me, the way I fish it, yes, dubbing would be a good substitute. If you could have peacock dubbing, ideal. You could do a dark olive, you could do a black. You could kind of mix those two together, because that's really what peacock herl is. It's just basically kind of an iridescent olive and black. So, I mean, that's one thing to think about is, you know, you can substitute. Substitutions aren't always bad. I will say, if you substitute, please don't call it a new fly. That's one of my favorite things, is all these versions, all these woolly buggers that go by a different name, and later on I might actually show you one or two. This thing is basically a woolly bugger. Because if you think about it, it's, you know, body material, palmered hackle. Okay, yeah, we got a wing on it. You could use marabou for the tail for this. I've never done it. Now that I thought about it, I'm like, I kind of dig that. So, looking at it, I got one fiber that's sticking forward that's going to drive me nuts. Ironically, I am under so much light here, I can't see it, but I can see it in the camera. And one down below. There we go. So, finished fly, finished picket pin. Great little pattern. One of those old school patterns that has fallen out of the favor of fly tyers and fly fishermen. Probably just because, it's old school, and a lot of those old school ones are, they'll fall out of favor and then come back. I kind of love it. And yesterday I was talking to a buddy, told him I was tying this thing up, and he goes, man, I haven't fished one of those in years. He goes, but man, they work. He goes, I just kind of forgot about that it existed. So yeah, he used to fish them up in central Pennsylvania. So I mean, just to give you an idea, he used to fish limestone spring creeks in central Pennsylvania with this fly. And his thought was, he goes, wonder how it would do it in mossy. So that was kind of his thought, was a summertime mossy fly. He's just like, I wonder how it would do. So we did one. We will do another one as that one falls. That one that's a good looking fly right there, actually, if I do say so myself. But like I said, guys, one of the things with tying is tying multiple ones. Your first fly is always going to be ugly. First time you've ever tied a particular pattern, if it comes out like it looks like in the book, there's something, you did something wrong, actually, then. So Brian's asking, how would you fish this fly in a pool or whatnot? So that's kind of the fun part. With this fly, if I were to put more hackle on it and fish it as a dry fly, put it up at the top of the pool, kind of put it up near, if you're fishing a brook trout stream, up near the plunge. Now this thing does not float like a cork. This is not a stimulator. This is not anything with foam. This thing is not a Royal Wolf. This thing doesn't float like a cork. You're going to want to put it into the smoother water and dead drift it through. So if you're going to fish it subsurface, tied up the way that it's tied up like this, I'm going to put it up into a similar area, and that white wing, and the fact this fly is only going to go an inch or two beneath the surface in general. Until you put some sort of split shot or something like that on there, it's not going to go very deep. With that white wing, you can watch it. You can kind of keep a slightly tight line to it. Depending on how you want to do it, you could. And you could watch the end of your line to move, or you could watch the fly, and if the fly were to either disappear, shoot off to the side, or physically you see a fish hit it, set the hook. So you fish it like a streamer, you're going to keep a tight line, you're going to twitch it through. There's another way to fish this, and you guys have heard me talk about tenkara. That's actually where I learned of this fly, was from the tenkara world. And you actually will cast it downstream, quarter downstream, and swing it through a pool. So it's not a technique I use for brook trout very often. But what you'll do is you'll literally quarter downstream, keep a tight line, and let that fly swing through the pool. And what it then looks like is a little bait fish or something, a big, well, I don't say at that point it looks like a little bait fish moving through the pool. Fish will hit it. They'll actually pulse it slightly. So as it's going, they'll just jiggle the rod tip just a little bit to kind of pulse the fly. If you wanted to tie this with a softer hackle than what I have, because, if you were to use, like a hen hackle instead of a rooster hackle, which is, I've used a rooster hackle here. If you were to use like a hen hackle, they're typically softer. That would be, that would end up giving you a little bit more pulse to it. So, and that's kind of where, soft hackle kind of concept comes from. But, really, how do you fish it? This is one of those cool flies that you fish it. You could put a split shot, put it underneath an indicator. There's nothing wrong with that. It looks like a big stonefly floating downstream. You could fish this fly even, and one way I might even do it is in a 2-fly rig. Fish it, as your top fly in a 2-fly rig. I like my heavily weighted fly in the bottom fly on my 2-fly rigs. Some people want the top fly to be their heavily weighted fly. It's a personal preference thing. I said probably about 10 years ago, I'm a bottoms heavy person, and I've stuck to that since then. That's literally a personal preference thing. So, but that's really, kind of how you're going to fish this fly. You're going to put it into, on a brook trout stream, you're going to put it near the current, but in the smoother water. you are gonna, that's where the fish are gonna be. Where the fish are gonna be, they want to be in the easiest water for them to live in. So you think about it, if you had the option of a slow treadmill or a fast treadmill that you had to live on, but the fast treadmill generally brought the food by, where would you hang out? I would hang out on the edge of the slow treadmill right next to the fast treadmill. So as the food went by, I could jump over to the fast treadmill and grab it. Easiest way to think about it is on these streams, that's what is going on, is in these higher current areas, that's where the food is moving through. So that's giving the fish basically food. And that's how they're going to do it, and that's where they're going to go. So, we're going to start out with another one, if you all would like. And I do have one other little thing I'd like to talk about at the very end. Brian had put out a request about 2 weeks ago now, I think, Brian? A week, 2 weeks ago, just asking for some ideas. Hey guys, this is for you. We're kind of doing what we think is going to be interesting to you, but it might not be. And we really kind of want some ideas. We're coming up, guys, we're like 6 weeks to being at a year of doing this. We're second week of January. It's amazing. So, coming up on a year. We just want some ideas from you guys. Had one request. I'm going to kind of go into it a little bit. I think Brian's going to go into it super in depth in a few weeks. I'm just going to kind of go into it a little bit just because we are at a good time of year for that. And I want to give you guys as many opportunities to get to go have some fun as you can. And I hope everyone's been getting out and fishing because, we've had good water for it. Now we're actually going to start going into, ironically, low water. Wintertime low water, which is sometimes fun. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my pheasant tails. Okay guys, that was interesting. My OBS studio just crashed for a second. I'm sorry about that. That was weird. I'm sure you guys might not have heard the ding. Looks like I'm getting a little bit of buffering tonight. Okay, that's interesting. So, doing my tail, okay, that is too long. Now if I was tying this as a dry fly, I might contemplate that long. That looks a lot better. Hook gap and a half-ish in length. Gonna go up. Nope, can't break them off. Pennsylvania pheasant must be tough. I joked with my buddy, asked him if he could get me any 3 Mile Island pheasant. The ones that are neon green that, are radioactive. He told me no, he doesn't hunt around there. Yeah, Brian, I think there's an update for OBS that I need to do. I don't know if you've done it. I'll just give you that heads up. It gave me a warning I need to do an update. So that might be the cause of tonight. So, want to put it shiny side towards us on the far side of the hook. Grab our pheasant tail, or not our pheasant tail, our Peacock herl. Grab a significant number of them. This fly does have a pretty fat body to it, so that's the reason why I say grab a significant number. So Peacock herl, if you're tying up some little stuff, it's great because the fact that you just use one. If you were going to tie this in, like, let's say a 12 or a 14, I'd cut out one or two. If I'm tying this in an 8, okay, at that point I might start thinking about using like a chenille or something because that's going to get pretty big, like a small chenille. Tie this bad boy in. Make sure we get them all tied down and work our way forward. Make sure we don't have a bump right there. I don't know if you could hear my thread did a little movement there. Did a little click. That's usually the sign that there was a bump. Go ahead and wrap. So yeah, if you guys want to dub on there, feel free. It's where I would do it tight dubbing. Yep, Brian's talking about the streamers. We are in streamer season. So we were 2 weeks ago in even better streamer season, but hey, you know, can't always stay in perfect streamer season. Oop. See? Busted one off. Told you this stuff is fragile. Yeah, trout fishing for streamers. We're not in bass season yet. So the cool thing is, bass season is coming. So if you all haven't learned, I actually usually, when I'm thinking, and I'm thinking about my flies, I'm usually 6 weeks early. I'm usually thinking 3 to 6 weeks ahead of everything. So I'll start tying up flies for, you know, for bass pretty soon. Bluegill really soon, because it won't be long and it's going to be bluegill season. This fly would be is an awesome bluegill fly. When the bluegill are on the beds, this is an awesome fly. I know there's a whole, you know, don't fish fish on the beds. Bluegill I have no problem with. They're bluegill. Don't worry, there's a billion of them. Just about every pond has too many of them, in my opinion. Because we don't get to have big giant bluegill the way that other places do. I'd love to be able to see some, you know, pound, 2 pound, 3 pound bluegill. So, we're going to wrap our hackle on. Yeah, we're going to do this with the hackle pliers. Grab our good old hackle pliers. 2, 3, 4, and a bit. But yeah, so Brian brought up, you know, the whole streamer thing. Yeah, we've got that coming. We'll do a little talk about that when we're done, because we're in a good time of year. For browns, for rainbows. Honestly, once trout get big, brookies, once trout get to be a certain size, they start feeding on meat. They don't want to eat bugs, they want to eat meat. So, all right. Wrap all that in. Grab our bucktail. Take off, like I said, I mean, think about how much you use for a clouser. Like, that's a lot of bucktail for this little tiny fly. But you need it because, in fact, you're only really using the very tips of the bucktail. And those get pretty thin. And I'm sure Lefty Cray just cried a bit in heaven for what I just did to that bucktail. Alright, now where did I put... There I put my... Grab our hair stacker. Get all the hair to go in. That can be sometimes the fun part. Go in there. Now annoy everybody in the area. Now you're done annoying everybody who lives in your house. Pull your hair out. So I just pulled it out into my left hand. I always do that. It's just, I pull it out in the direction that I'm going to want the hair to be headed. So if I was tying something with where the hair went forward, because there are a few flies out there where the hair goes, you know, this way. I would have taken it out of the hair stacker like that. So now we're going to go ahead and figure out the length of our wing. That looks pretty good to me. Okay, so notice I've got it in my right hand, and what I always do, guys, I don't know if anybody's ever picked up on this, I put my right hand about where my thread's going to go. So basically, I am looking at how long that wing is and what I'm going to see. Now I'm going to take it, switch over, put lots of fingers into the camera lens, and I'm going to basically put my left hand right about where I want to tie in again. And I say right about, I mean, guys, we're not talking to the nearest nanometer. We're talking about. So that is how that I put materials in. It allows me to be able to set lengths pretty well. Now, if you look, a little bit longer on my tail than I normally would go. Okay, not a big deal. I have not pulled on tight. I can shorten up my tail. Or not, I keep calling it my tail, my wing. I can shorten that up. So that's one of the cool things. Now, what allows for that is the fact that bucktail is slick. It actually is a fairly slick material, and I didn't talk about thread size for this. I'm tying on an 8/0 thread. I'm tying on an 8/0 because I'm tying on a size 10. Typically, that's about where I am. 8/0 is good for, on reality, 10 on up. I could tie on a 6/0. I just can't find my 6/0 black thread. Someday I'm going to have a nice organized fly tying area. But sadly, till that day. And I will say this, with work from home, which is what I've been doing, this desk that I'm tying at right now, I got to this desk at about 7:30 this morning, turned on my work computer, so been here all day. Also makes it hard because I can't tie and work at the same time. My boss will call me up and I'll have to put the webcam on and he'll see that I'm tying flies. Alright, back, we want to wrap in the material. My fingers are getting all over the camera. I'm sorry, guys. I love this camera angle for you guys to be able to see as I'm wrapping stuff in, because that's really kind of how you're looking at the fly as you're tying. At least, hopefully you are. It's just, unfortunately, your hands tend to get in the way. Put a couple of wraps in. We want to make a nice pretty head. Then I just kind of pull up. I'll take a couple of wraps off. Make sure we lock in that material. Take our nice sharp scissors that we don't let anybody else ever touch. Yes. My fly tying scissors are worse than most people's fabric scissors. That is a punishable by death if you cut anything other than fly tying materials with my fly tying scissors. Make our head, pull a little bit out, whip finish. Now if you wanted to use a half hitch, feel free to use a half hitch. There's nothing wrong with the half hitch. Now, if you wanted to put some head cement on there, nothing wrong with that either, because, head cement makes flies last longer, and when they last longer, you can catch more fish with them. I don't tend to do that, because as we know, I like to tie a lot of them. I don't get to fish nearly as much as I should, so thus, I try to make them die quicker. I try to make my flies fall apart quick. Not saying that I want them to fall apart after one fish, but I try to make them where, 5 or 6 fish, they start unraveling. That is fine with me. So, guys, that is the Picket pin. Versatile fly. You can tie it in basically everything from about an 8 to a 14. It's kind of typically going to be a bigger fly. You're going to want to use about a 2x long hook. And like I said, I used a bead head hook. You could even use a short shank hook. Just remember, you're going to get a really short body. So, now I'm going to kind of want to talk a little bit about, streamer fishing. We're in that time of year. It's winter time. Time to fish some big streamers. We're trying to fish streamers for trout. Yeah, Lee, that is, yeah. I can tell you that I've had plenty of people go to grab my fly tying scissors who are around my place, and one, they figure out they are really sharp. Two, yeah, I'm just not going to allow it. So, going back to our little talk about streamers. Cool thing is, okay, where do you find the fish? Really, when trout get to be of a certain size, and it depends on the river, but typically about a 12-inch fish is gonna do a majority switch over from being, you know, at 12 to 15 they kind of do both, but at 12 inches they start eating meat, and they start eating other fish. So, you know, think about it, you know, typically your bigger fish, what they want. I've got one fly I don't have in here, but I think you all know when I tell you which one it is, you know, what fly it is, and I won't have to show it to you. But start off, you know, streamer fishing. Let me just try to grab a... Wow, I have no decent looking clousers in here. All my clousers look ugly. That's fine. Ugly flies catch fish. But first one, the good old clouser minnow. This is a black and gold. So if you're in the Richmond area, that's a VCU colored one. So streamers. Streamers are flies that are typically going to be fished on a tight line, and you pull them through the water. So they generally going to imitate a bait fish, or a crayfish, or a hellermite. Things that actively move through the water. So a streamer is an actively fished fly. A nymph is a passively fished fly. You're going to let that fly drift. So we're going to fish a streamer, and trout fishing, you know, we start talking about, you know, wintertime trout, the fish are going to be down deep, they're still eating, they still do eat, just not as much, and they are, you know, this is how to kind of target some of your bigger fish. So once trout get to be of a certain size, and on a lot of streams it's, you know, depends on how many other big trout are around, but about 15 inches, typically they start kind of searching out good areas. Think of them as a bass, actually, at that point. Start looking for log jams. Start looking for, you know, rocks they can hide behind. Rocks they can hide in. They want to go find cover. Other trout are going to be, the smaller trout that are eating insects, they want to be in that current. They want to be, you know, where the food is getting brought to them. Big fish don't do that. They want to eat one big meal, you know, one or two big meals a day. Whereas, you know, they don't want to eat popcorn all day. They want to have a big steak. Really the easiest way to think about, you know, how these fish are. So this is a fairly small little clouser, little Crelex. This guy's about 1.5 inches, 2 inches long. Tied up on a size 2 hook, debarbed, as best of debarbing as I could. And something like that, that's going to be a smaller little streamer for your bigger trout. Still a great little snack, and what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to put this fly as close as you can to cover. You know, the nastier the cover, the better. You know, if it's cover with a deep hole near it, even better. So something like that is a great fly to throw. I'm going to pull out another kind of, this is actually sort of a Chuck Craft fly. I think I've got the tail upside down, and now that I look at it, but hey, whatever. And don't ask me what, oh, it's actually, no, now I remember. Fly is called a curly tail bug. So it's using one of the Chuck Craft curly tails. It's got dumbbell eyes. If you notice, I've got dumbbell eyes on everything. I want to fish these flies down low, and I got a little bit of rubber legs on it. And then I've actually got dubbing in here. That is actually dubbing. I did this in a dubbing loop, which I think I've showed you guys before. This is the cool thing with dubbing loops. You can get this super buggy profile. Something like this twitched through the water. You're going to actively pull it through the water. So, something like this, and that's going to cause that tail to kind of vibrate, helping to attract the fish in. So, one more fly, and this is kind of this is a small version of it because I realized I must have given away my, no, maybe not given away, let a friend borrow, let's just say, and I've never returned, I never got it back, so I'm going to say gave it away, I guess. my bigger ones of these. This is tied up on a size 4, and all this is rabbit. This is a pile of rabbit. This fly has definitely been in the water because you can see that it is discolored. The head has been discolored. But this is tied up on a... Actually, that's a 6. That's a size 6. Size 6 4X long hook. And that is a sculpin head from Fishmaster. Or Flymaster. Sorry, Flymaster. Or Fly Fishman. Sorry, Fly Fishman. I'll remember their name. Martin. That's where it comes from. I know the owner. He's a great guy. So all this fly is the bottom and the sides. That is cross-cut rabbit. This is tied up in natural with a brown top. And then this top piece, and this actually forms the tail, is a zonker strip. So this thing is pretty simple. You just basically palmer rabbit up, and then you basically poke the hook point through your rabbit, and then tie it off at the front and put on your sculpin head. These sculpin heads actually go on last. They slide onto the front of the fly, and these things are heavy. This is a chuck and duck. This is kind of, well, actually it's not a chuck and duck because I've actually got a fly called a chuck and duck. But this thing is, in this size, is pushing a 5 weight. This is really a 6 or a 7 weight. I tie these things up into a size 2, and they'll be 6 inches long. And I will fish something like this. The rabbit is going to give all kinds of movement in the water. And this head, because if you look at kind of its shape, it also gives a little bit of movement going through the water. And this is the kind of thing I'm going to do that quartering downstream. I'm going to cast quartering, so when you think about a river, if you look straight downstream, that's straight downstream. If you look straight across stream, that's 90 degrees across stream. Look straight upstream, okay, that's straight upstream. Quartering downstream. So quartering means I'm going to go to somewhere between 45 to 65 degrees from directly across the stream. And I'm going to cast that rod, and I'm going to keep a tight line, and I'm going to try to drift this thing, twitching it by cover. And what you're going to be feeling for is the fly to either stop, your rod to get jerked out of your hand. That's the ideal thing, which I've only ever had happen about once or twice. Generally the fly is going to stop, and what you're going to do then is obviously set the hook, and hopefully you've got a good sized fish on. I won't lie, sometimes you'll get some little fish, oftentimes rock bass. If you've ever caught a red eye or a rock bass out of the rivers, yep, that's not uncommon. They've got I always joke that they'll eat something the same size as them because they think it's edible. So things like that. 2 other flies. I know I said this was the last one, but I realized 2 other flies. Last one that I've actually got an example of because actually if you guys give me a second I can go grab one, but this is called a chuck and duck. Anybody who's ever tied a woolly bugger, right now this thing looks like a woolly bugger. Oh wait, it doesn't. It's a woolly bugger with dumbbell eyes. That is what this fly is. This is another bigger fly. And if you notice, I'm showing big flies because you gotta give these fish something to eat. You gotta give them a reason to swim out of their lair to go eat it. And all these things also tend to look like sculpins. So a sculpin is a little, they're a minnow. Well, not really, they're not a minnow, but they're a small fish that dart around, usually between the rocks. They don't tend to like to come up higher up in the water column. So you're going to want to fish these things as deep as you can. That sort of thing these fish are going to love. The last fly, I'm not going to go get it. You guys know it. It's the clawdad. Now, the biggest non-steelhead, and actually even steelhead, trout I've ever caught was on a clawdad. And I'll tell you guys how I caught it. So, I'm not going to tell you where. Sorry, that's for me to know and you to talk to the guy who helped me catch it. So, he's actually been on before with us. So, what I did was followed what he was telling me to do. Not gonna lie, it was not my plan. Put the clawdad into a deep hole it had big rocks in the bottom. Basically gave great cover for these fish. And what I did, I'm just gonna throw a fly into the vise so that you guys have got something pretty to look at so you're not looking at nothing. What I did is I literally put it up and I kept a tight line on the fly. And tight line is exactly what it means. I wasn't jerking the fly, but I was keeping just slight tension on the fly, drifting it down, fishing a clawhead, kind of bouncing my rod tip every once in a while. And at one point, I caught plenty of fish this way, and I can just kind of tell you how it happens. You're bouncing the rod, and all of a sudden it feels like you picked up almost a log, or something all of a sudden just got heavy. Fly just got significantly heavier. Set the hook. Chances are, well, you got two options. Either you're setting the hook into a fish, or you're setting the hook into the bottom/log. You'll know it pretty quick, you think. With that fish, quite literally, set the hook, thought I had a log. Was slowly bringing it up, because I'm like, oh, the log's moving. I'll get my fly back at least, which is always a positive. Until I realized that the log had a white belly on it. Yeah, it's a 26-inch rainbow. So, yes, flies like this, that's what you do, is you are going to kind of give them easy meals. Big fish are lazy. They are inherently lazy. They didn't get big by, going out and wasting all their energy swimming around trying to chase after everything. They didn't get big by eating, everything that they see. They got big by being smart. I'm going to tell you something. Big fish aren't, they're not dumb. They get big by, conserving their energy. So they're going to sit there and generally go for these big meals, and they're not going to eat very often. Oh, I got hair coming out. I got fibers coming out of that. They're not going to eat all the time. So what we're looking for in water conditions, because this also is a key to catching big fish in my opinion, we don't want low and clear. They're not comfortable in low and clear. They didn't get big by being dumb. They didn't get big by going swimming around in low and clear water and having a hawk, or having an osprey or something come out of the sky and land on them. They learned real early on that when the water's low and clear, they hide. So you're going to want to look for dirty water. I'm not saying, the water looks like the tail of this fly where you can't see, you can't see an eighth of an inch. You want to have a foot or two of visibility, kind of stained up water. Usually that means high water. And I'm not just talking about Mossy Creek, though that is ideal conditions on Mossy Creek. If you ever get rumor that the conditions are like that, leave work. Tell your boss you're leaving. Don't worry about it. They'll understand. Not. And get over there. That's how you go find the big fish. If you hear about that on the South River, that's how you find the big fish. If you hear about that on pretty much every river, that is ideal conditions. It's what it is. It's what we're looking for. Big fish are not an everyday occurrence. It's not I'm going to go target big fish today. It's I know there are going to be good conditions, so I'm going to go target big fish. And now one other thing that I'm going to talk about is your rod selection. A 5-weight will work. It does work just fine. 6, 7, 8 is preferred because you're starting to throw some big stuff. The main thing is your leader. Do not, please do not go out with a 5X leader. You're going to want to fish 2X or heavier. We're talking our bass fishing leaders. I've got one friend who I don't want to talk about how many times he has called me borderline crying that he had some monster on in the South River and he lost it because he was fishing 5X because he had been fishing with nymphs and didn't want to go and totally change out his leader. But he wanted to go put on a streamer because he saw a big fish and wanted to go target it. Take the time to change out your leader. One of the big reasons also is just being able to get that hook set. A 5X leader stretches a ton. When you think about it, these fish, you want to be able to pull hard. I mean, I'm bending the hook there. You want to be able to give those fish pull hard. That's how you get that hook into them. So, wanted to kind of talk a little bit about, fishing for big fish because we'd had a request for it and, it's one of those things. We are in a good time of year to do it. It's, we're getting those high water conditions. We were getting rain regularly. We were getting snow. That seems to have dried up. No pun intended. So, looking at the long-range forecast, at least for Richmond, we don't have a whole lot of rain in the long-range forecast. I'm not crying about it. My front yard and backyard are literally underwater still. So I'm more than happy to let it dry out a bit. But if you want to go out and do target some bigger fish, put on some bigger flies. This is literally a size 2 woolly bugger. You know, you could fish a size 2 conehead woolly bugger. There's a great one. You know, I'm looking in my box and I don't have any size 2 conehead woolly buggers. I need some. But something like that, you know, just go out there and throw on something bigger. Go have fun. But at the same time, don't forget about the little fish. They are fun. You know, they are day makers. You know, worst case, at least I caught something. Big fish days, if I go target them, I know that my chances are, you know, I'm looking at probably about a 50 to 75% chance I'm going home with nothing. But I'm going in there with that attitude that I might not catch a fish. But if I catch a fish, oh, it's going to be an Instagram worthy fish. So kind of, you know, kind of my thought process on that. But other than that, I wanted to have everyone have a good day, good night. You know, it's or good night, day and night at the same time. Cool, awesome. Good night, and everyone have a great week. So we're gonna have some fun. I don't know what Brian's planning for in 2 weeks. Honestly, we got to talk about that. We say it every week. And everybody have a great night. Bye.